In the small town of Enderby, a married couple was found brutally murdered in their home, shot and stabbed viciously. A kitchen knife was lying on the victim's back, making the scene even more chilling. Who could commit such a crime? Canadian investigators had to go through a risky, undercover operation that took years to catch the killer. But can they get him to confess to the crime? Watch the full story here. Enderby, British Columbia, is a small, friendly town where most of the residents work as dairy farmers. One of its locals, 48-year-old Derk Roelfsema, was a successful and dedicated farmer. After being single for a long time, Derk met Audrey through a personal ad in the local newspaper. They married and became a perfect match, even though they had some differences, like when it came to keeping llamas, Audrey's favorite animal, which Derk reluctantly agreed to care for due to his kind nature. Audrey, who loved knitting, was very passionate about her hobby. Derk was known as a meticulous and reliable man, while Audrey brought joy into their home. Their life seemed harmonious until tragedy struck and changed everything. But something unusual happened on November 26, 2001. Derk didn't show up as promised to help Kevin with their shared tasks. Kevin tried calling him on Sunday, but there was no answer. Even Derk's answering machine wasn't picking up, which felt really strange to Kevin. Kevin hoped Derk would show up on Monday morning, but that didn't happen either. Derk was known for being very punctual. If he said he'd be somewhere, he'd always be there. He was someone who always kept his promises, showing his high level of commitment and responsibility. 4 days later, Kevin still hadn't heard from Derk. Feeling suspicious, Kevin decided to stop by his house. He drove up to Derk's driveway, looked around, and noticed that everything seemed normal. However, Kevin realized that the couple's car wasn't there. In his mind, Kevin tried to think positively. Maybe Derk and Audrey had gone on a sudden trip. But that seemed highly unlikely for a couple so predictable and always open with their family. Derk would definitely let someone know if he was going away, and so would Audrey, Kevin thought. Meanwhile, Audrey also began to be missed. She hadn't shown up for meetings, activities, or her spinning events, which was very unusual for her. Kevin became increasingly worried and certain that something was wrong. After checking Derk's house, he returned home with a growing sense of unease. Concern deepened when more than a week passed without any word from Derk and Audrey. Normally, Derk would call his mother to let her know if he was going away for a few days, but this time there was no communication at all. This made the family feel that something was seriously wrong. On December 2nd, the family asked Tony Tillert to check Derk's property. Despite his bad feeling and fear, Tony agreed to carry out the family's request. When Tony arrived at the property, he found something shocking. The llamas on the farm hadn't been fed for several days, a clear sign that no one had been taking care of them. That moment, Tony realized that something was terribly wrong. Tony nervously stepped onto the porch of Derk and Audrey's house and peered through the window. When he looked inside, he was shocked to see Derk's body lying on the floor, covered with a blanket. Panic set in as Tony thought, "Oh my God, I hope it's just a heart attack." But the reality he was about to face was far more terrifying than he could have imagined. Through his hazy view, Tony could only make out the body covered by the blanket on the floor. He quickly dialed 911. The operator asked, "So you think there's a body on the floor? Do you know this person?" Tony answered with a trembling voice, "Yes, he's my good friend." When asked for the name, Tony replied, "Derk." The police were quickly dispatched to the scene and forced open the door. Tony, still at the farm, immediately called Derk's family. When the police arrived, they asked Tony to enter the house. Inside, Tony, along with the officers, discovered Audrey's body in a room. Couple had been shot dead before being brutally stabbed with a sharp weapon. Their bodies were lying on the floor, with Audrey found near a chair and Derk lying slightly to her left, covered by a blanket. Knives were still embedded in Audrey's back, adding to the horror of the scene. Their hands and feet were bound with duct tape, and ropes were tied around their wrists. The homicide detectives immediately contacted Derk's family to deliver the devastating news officially. Police and the community could never have imagined such cruelty occurring in their small town. The news of this brutal murder quickly spread through the tight-knit community of Enderby, sparking many questions and fears. How could something like this happen to two innocent people in such a safe place? Residents whispered in disbelief. The motive behind this horrific crime remained a mystery. "It's hard to understand why they were killed so brutally," one of their neighbors remarked. The loss of the couple shocked and saddened the community, leaving everyone feeling unsafe. Even the experienced investigators admitted to being taken aback by the brutality they encountered at the crime scene. The small police team in Enderby requested help with the investigation, and Lisa Stewart from the British Columbia Major Crime Unit was called to join the effort. After being involved in hundreds of investigations, Lisa knew that cases like this are often full of twists and turns, almost as if they have a life of their own. "This case promised to be a much bigger challenge," said Lisa. "Was this a crime driven by passion? Was it related to drugs, revenge, wealth, or love? Who had the motive to want them dead?" Lisa wondered. Their home in Enderby, British Columbia, a well-known couple was found dead. They had been bound with duct tape before being shot and stabbed repeatedly. This is a very brutal murder. "I've investigated about 13 homicide cases in the British Columbia area, and Derk and Audrey's deaths are among the worst," said Lisa. The police had to figure out the motive behind the murder. Did the couple owe money to the wrong person, or were they involved in drugs? Despite appearing fine on the outside, there might have been deeper issues at play. Derk was the most honest person in Enderby. "He would never owe even a penny," said his family. Was this a robbery gone wrong? However, there were no signs of forced entry. As the police searched for fingerprints, they found nothing. This was clearly a very clean and planned crime. Killer must have known a lot about them. The perpetrator drenched the couple's bodies in gasoline, leading investigators to consider the possibility of a psychopathic killer, perhaps even a serial killer. "It seems like he tried to erase his tracks by setting the house on fire," said the police. They also discovered a timer plugged into an outlet with a curling iron connected to the timer. "This became crucial information that was not released to the public," said the police. Only the killer knew this. Police hoped that the duct tape used to bind the victims would provide DNA evidence. Additionally, they found a spent cartridge at the crime scene. Derk and Audrey had been shot, and the cartridge could be used for DNA analysis or ballistic testing. Investigators sent the evidence for DNA testing, although the results would take several weeks. Suddenly, time became the enemy for the investigation team, said Lisa Stewart. Lisa's first task was to determine when the couple had been killed. She began talking to friends, family, and neighbors. The first question was, when was the last time anyone saw or heard from Derk or Audrey? Forensic pathologists estimated that their bodies had been in the house for about a week, which left the investigators shaken. The first 24 to 48 hours are crucial in a murder investigation, they said. Investigators learned that Derk's visa had been used on Saturday, November 24th in the Vernon area. It was confirmed that Derk was still alive on that date. There was a phone call to Audrey at 4 p.m. from one of her friends. Investigators believe this might have been the last contact before the murder. The following day, someone else tried calling the couple. Normally, Audrey would answer the phone by the second or third ring. If not, the answering machine would pick up. But this time, the phone kept ringing with no answer. Investigators asked Barry Roelfsema, Derk's brother, to join the investigation at the victim's home. All the evidence pointed to the killer disturbing the couple between 5 and 7 p.m. on Saturday, November 24th, before brutally killing them. Barry informed the police that the couple's black Honda was missing. The police felt this could be a crucial part of the investigation if we could find it, Barry said. He also mentioned that the fuel line from the gas tank had come loose. Derk would never have done something like that. Investigators suspect the killer may have poured gasoline from the victim's tank near the side of the house before the bodies were discovered. The investigators' instincts suggested that the murder was carried out by someone familiar with the place. Could have been a family member, neighbor, friend, or someone close to the couple, especially since they didn't have children. Derk's younger brother, Barry, was already on the radar for questioning. Barry was known by local authorities for being a troublemaker, involved in small gangs and often trying to appear tougher than he was. His lifestyle had been difficult. He had borrowed money from his family, but that source of income had been cut off. When emotions are involved, family members can do anything, even kill the people they love most. This could be the case here, as we've seen in many cases around the world, said one investigator. The police requested Barry to come in for an interview. While he reluctantly agreed, his behavior raised red flags and was suspicious to the investigators. He was uncooperative and closed off, prompting the police to dig deeper into whether he stood to gain financially from Derk and Audrey's deaths, possibly through inheritance. Lisa Stewart was concerned about what she had uncovered. I met with Derk and Audrey's accountant and financial planner. Regarding their land and house, everything would be inherited by their family members, she explained. Police asked both siblings to provide DNA samples to compare with the DNA found on the tape at the crime scene. Barry immediately agreed, but Derk's younger brother continued to adamantly refuse to give a sample. Naturally, this raised more suspicion. When someone refuses to provide DNA, the police immediately think, "Bingo, we've got our person." Someone who is innocent would want to help the police as much as possible, but his actions suggested he was hiding something. Under pressure from both the police and his family, the younger brother finally agreed to cooperate. While waiting for the DNA results, Lisa Stewart began investigating another possible issue, this time between Derk and a neighbor. The neighbor ran a large dairy farm operation but didn't have enough land to support his livestock. So, he had an agreement with Derk to use his land as a pasture for his cows, Lisa said. However, this neighbor was not particularly well liked in the community. Many people saw him as someone who only cared about his business and had little regard for relationships with others. Rumors began to circulate that the neighbor might have been contacted by someone about a profitable new business opportunity involving the land he leased from Derk. He was approached by two men who were described as looking like motorcycle gang members. They came to negotiate about growing marijuana on the land, Lisa explained. This became an intriguing lead in the murder case of Derk and his wife. Everyone knew that dealing with illegal goods could lead to unexpected consequences. Surprisingly, the neighbor was forthcoming about his conflict with Derk. He claimed he wanted to cooperate fully with the investigation. However, he was confronted with allegations regarding marijuana cultivation. Investigators asked, "I heard that two people, allegedly members of the Hells Angels, approached you to grow marijuana. Is that true? We need the truth." The man vehemently denied it, saying, "No, that's ridiculous. It never happened." He then gave permission for his property to be searched, and after a thorough investigation, no signs of marijuana cultivation were found. Additionally, his alibi for the time of the murders proved to be very solid. He could verify that he was at a different location during the days of the killings. Based on this evidence, he was cleared of suspicion. However, before being dismissed, he informed the investigators about a farm worker who had previously had a dispute with Derk Roelfsema. This new lead brought the investigation into a different direction, with the farm worker now under scrutiny. The person, later identified as Renee Ryan, had lived on Derk and Audrey's property for about a year. Derk had a rental trailer and Renee stayed in that trailer, Lisa revealed. The police began investigating Renee's background and activities. They uncovered a long-standing, intense conflict between Renee and Derk. The dispute was deeply rooted, with both parties harboring significant animosity. Conflict began a year prior when Renee had gone back to Quebec to visit her family. When she left, the temperature was below freezing. During that time, the oil tank was nearly empty and she was worried the place would freeze, Lisa explained. As the property owner, Derk had entered the trailer to check the pipes and ensure everything was in order. When Renee returned, she was furious. She even wanted to call the police. She was shocked that Derk had entered her trailer without permission, Lisa added. This incident sparked a huge argument between Renee and Derk. Derk refused to back down, and eventually, in February 2001, 9 months before the murder, Derk served Renee an eviction notice. However, the issues didn't end there. Renee continued to work on a nearby farm, which kept the tension between her and Derk ongoing. This unresolved conflict added yet another layer of complexity to the investigation. Despite the ongoing feud between Renee and Derk, which seemed unrelated to the murder, Renee made some suspicious comments a few days after the bodies were discovered and the couple's car went missing. She worked on a large dairy farm that had a large waste lagoon. She remarked, "They'll never find the car," Lisa Stewart recalled. Renee also added, "If I had to hide the car, I would put it in the waste lagoon." Sarsan Stewart decided to visit Renee at her current residence, a roadside motel. Her English wasn't very good, so the investigators tried to communicate as best they could, Stewart explained. Stewart asked about the dispute with Derk. Renee insisted that she hadn't allowed the oil tank to run empty. She felt Derk was just looking for an excuse to enter her trailer and snoop through her things. Though a year had passed, Renee was still angry and defensive, blaming Derk for the incident. However, she firmly stated that the disagreement had never been serious enough to lead to violence, let alone murder. Moreover, on the day the couple was killed, she was working at the dairy farm milking cows, and she could prove it. Despite her alibi, her comments about hiding the car and her ongoing animosity toward Derk raised enough suspicion to keep her under investigation. Renee presented her work calendar, marking all of her shifts, morning, afternoon, or night. She worked long hours, which seemed to provide a solid alibi. However, the question remained, was she willing to provide a DNA sample? In the midst of the conversation, Sergeant Stewart was taken aback when Renee suddenly expressed the desire to consult with a lawyer. The investigator calmly responded, "Feel free to consult with a lawyer. You need to understand your rights before voluntarily providing your DNA sample." A few days later, Renee came to the police station. They reviewed the consent form, which clearly stated that providing a DNA sample was voluntary and not coerced. Renee agreed to provide her sample. Meanwhile, the results from the other samples arrived. The DNA from Derk's younger brother did not match the evidence, clearing him as a suspect. The investigators also conducted a polygraph test, which Derk's brother passed, confirming that he was truthful when he stated that he had not murdered his brother or his sister-in-law. Then, a surveillance recording surfaced, showing a man dressed in military attire and wearing a bandana that covered his face. This new lead raised further questions and pointed to the possibility of someone else being involved in the crime. There was no clarity on whether the perpetrator was male or female, or even if this was someone who might strike again. Investigators felt immense pressure to quickly find the brutal killer of Derk and Audrey Roelfsema, residents of Enderby. The local police and the Enderby community government were also concerned. People started locking their doors and felt uneasy because the killer had not been found, fearing a random murder similar to those committed by serial killers. The community began to grow suspicious of strangers. The once peaceful town became filled with panic. Suspicious reports started coming in, including one about a person seen cycling from a neighboring town, who was soon under suspicion, along with numerous reports of unfamiliar faces in the area. This situation resembled the kind of mistaken perception that occurs when Israeli citizens suspect a young Palestinian child of being a terrorist. Turned out that the suspected person was just a local resident riding his bike, but rumors and gossip spread quickly. Investigators had to sift through all of this information to separate facts from fiction. Pressure from the public to solve the case was immense. Could the missing car of the couple be the key to solving this case? The person driving it might be responsible for the murders, the investigators speculated. Helicopters scoured the area in search of the vehicle, and the police called on the public for assistance in locating and reporting any sightings of the black Honda. Suddenly, calls began pouring in from all over British Columbia. The car was seen in Vancouver on its way to Prince George and in Kelowna. As Sergeant Stewart followed up on all these tips, investigators gathered surveillance footage from the area. We requested law enforcement agencies along the route to collect footage from businesses and even from nearby toll gates. Around 140 hours of video footage had to be reviewed to check if the black Honda had passed through the toll gates. Despite numerous reports of sightings, none led to the missing couple's vehicle. The police started to wonder, could the killer have sunk the car into a local dirt pit? The pit in question was enormous, large enough to accommodate a semi-truck. The police drained the pit, but in the end, no car was found at the bottom. The investigation seemed to be stuck in the mud. A lot of time was spent trying to locate the small car, giving the impression that this investigation might take a long time. On December 10th, 8 days after the discovery of Derk and Audrey's bodies, family and friends gathered for a memorial. Community remained concerned that the killer was still at large. Investigators uncovered ATM withdrawals made from the couple's accounts after their murders, revealing that the perpetrator had deliberately tied them up to obtain their PIN numbers. The first withdrawal was just $80 and the second was $100. Surveillance footage showed a man dressed in military attire with his face covered by a mask. At an ATM located in a convenience store, the CCTV video was more focused on the front door. 1 minute before Audrey's account withdrawal, a man was seen entering through the front door. He then stepped out of the camera's view, so the transaction inside wasn't recorded. Could this be the killer of Derk and Audrey? It appeared that the man removed his jacket and mask, now wearing a gray hoodie. However, the poor quality of the footage made it difficult to identify the man. Police would need to work on clarifying the poor CCTV footage to help with identification. Police enhanced the image quality from the video footage and circulated it through the RCMP network. A female officer recognized the man as someone she knew, René Thurian, a French-Canadian dairy farm worker in Enderby. René's full name was René Thurian, a former tenant of Derk Roelfsema who was dissatisfied with their arrangement. However, not only did René have an alibi for the night of the double murder, but he was also known as a relaxed, friendly, and ordinary man. There was no direct evidence linking René to the ATM, only suspicion based on circumstantial evidence, still not enough to prove he was the killer. The farm worker claimed he was milking cows during the murders. Investigators estimated that Derk and Audrey were killed after dinner on November 24th, based on autopsy results showing they had recently eaten a large meal. René worked 2 shifts with a 3-hour break between them, enough time for the alleged murder. Records indicated that he finished his shift at 11:30 p.m., which would have allowed him to reach the ATM by 12:25 a.m. Although investigators had video footage showing a man in the store who resembled René, they still needed to prove without a doubt that he had enough time to get there. One investigator tried driving through back roads at average speed and arrived in Armstrong in 18 minutes. This became a part of the puzzle against René, but it still wasn't enough to apprehend him. Suddenly, René quit his well-paying job and moved out of the motel, triggering suspicion from the investigators. He left the motel without informing the police. At the police station, investigators received an important report from the ballistics lab. Shell casings from a .22 caliber bullet were found at the crime scene. The ballistics lab revealed that the casings came from a very rare weapon. Police also received a photo illustration of the weapon, which turned out to be a military-style firearm. There were only 8 registered 22 caliber Calico guns in Canada. Officers were sent to all 8 locations and one was found in the Maritimes. The owner said, "I no longer have it. I sold it to someone named Renee Tryon." This shocking revelation provided increasingly clear evidence. But did Renee still have the weapon? Lisa Stewart followed up on the lead by speaking to the neighboring children who worked on the farm with Renee. Children remembered that Renee owned a .22 caliber rifle. When one of the cows got sick and had to be put down, Renee said, "I have a gun." He then took the rifle and shot the cow. One of the neighbor children clearly remembered the rifle and even drew a sketch in their police notebook. The sketch showed that it was indeed a unique weapon, making Renee the prime suspect. However, the police still needed more evidence to arrest him. They needed to prove that Renee was the one who pulled the trigger. Would the long-awaited DNA results be the deciding factor? For weeks after the investigation began, the police connected the rare .22 caliber rifle used to kill Derk and Audrey Roelfsema to farm worker Renee Tryon. Pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Police knew Renee had a gun, and they also learned that he held a grudge against Derk for entering his trailer and then evicting him. Renee Tryon, who was deep in debt, was suspected of committing a cold-blooded murder. The DNA profile from the tape that bound Audrey's legs matched Renee's DNA. Although the DNA results were crucial evidence, it remained circumstantial. The DNA on the tape only indicated that Renee Tryon had touched it, not that he was the murderer. As a tenant in the victim's trailer, there were many plausible explanations for his DNA being present. Similarly, the use of the couple's bank cards, ATM footage only showed someone wearing a mask, so their identity couldn't be confirmed. Months went by, but investigators seemed no closer to proving that the former farm worker was the killer of Derk and Audrey Roelfsema. Renee had moved back to Quebec, and all other leads had gone cold. The fact that the killer was still at large left both the police and the community unsettled. Some neighbors may have criticized the investigators for the slow pace of the process, feeling that the case should have been resolved sooner. However, they had to understand that investigations like this take time. Finally, in December 2002, a year after the murders, an officer went to Quebec and launched an undercover operation that hoped to make Renee confess to the crime. Over time, the agent, disguised as a criminal, carefully approached him. They tried to get Renee to become part of their group and secure a job within the organization. The agents worked to make Renee trust them, building a friendship. This was a strategic chess game for the police. It took about 7 months to make Renee believe the undercover agents were his friends. Then goinvestigators moved in, asking Renee to attend an important meeting with Mr. Big, who was supposedly the head of the illegal operation. Bob Goebel was overseeing the operation from a nearby room. Initially, Renee confessed to the murder of the couple. Then I went back and closed it. I put a little gasoline there on the couch and I went to Armstrong. He revealed some hidden details and Mr. Turin was able to provide all the correct information. He mentioned about 4 or 5 points that only he could know, and of course the most significant was the timer and the curling iron. Renee said, "I came back after I set the timer. I found the curling iron there and it might be valuable." He also said that he had set the timer before leaving, and when it went off, the house would catch fire, destroying all the evidence. One of the biggest shocks he got was when he returned and the house was still standing, not burned, and he was surprised by his failed actions. Finally, Renee confessed and was captured in an audio and video recording. However, the police were still lacking one crucial piece of evidence: the missing Derk's car. The helicopter could not find it, and our search and rescue team also couldn't locate it. Where was the car? The exhausting undercover operation had made the suspect, Renee Tryon, reveal information that only the killer of the couple could have known. But the police didn't want to take any risks. knowing that defense lawyers could attack their investigation and cause all the evidence to be dismissed. Team decided to search for one last piece of evidence in this puzzle. In his interview with Mr. Big, Rene revealed that he had hidden the car and claimed no one would find it. Mr. Big convinced Rene that he had to destroy all the murder evidence, and Rene followed their instructions, taking them back to British Columbia. Rene revealed the location of the car in a remote forestry road. After the murder, he drove the car and pushed it into a ravine. A fallen tree covered the car, making it invisible from the air during the search. That was the final, undeniable piece of evidence the investigators needed. The following day, the undercover operator instructed Rene to meet at a gas station in West Kelowna. Police officers arrested him for the first-degree murders of Audrey and Derk. After 3 years of intense investigation, the murderer of Derk and Audrey, Roelfsema, was finally caught. It was like a Hollywood crime film, but this was live action in Canada. Was that satisfying? Yes, it was satisfying. It was a huge relief when the arrest was made. At the police station, Rene casually confessed to the investigators, recounting how he had brutally killed the couple. On November 5, 2006, nearly 5 years after their deaths, Rene pleaded guilty to the second-degree murders of Derk and Audrey Roelfsema. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, investigators still don't truly know what his motive was. Was it because of money? What money did he gain? Only a few $100s? Or was it because of anger or hatred? Only Rene knows, and he never revealed it in court. Time may heal, but it doesn't make you forget the panic. He took away the lives of 2 incredible people who should have lived them together with their community. There's nothing that can bring that back. The Enderby community hopes that such an event will never happen again. In 2007, the investigators received a special award from the Attorney General for their hard work and exceptional perseverance. That's the end of this long story. But don't go anywhere, because we'll be back with more thrilling and exciting stories. See you in the next video. Remember to show some love, subscribe, and leave a comment below regarding this case.